Start recording, and it's actually recording tonight. That's great. It's September the 24th, 2019. This is GWU MELS 601 add-on, and I'm Dr. Robin Hamilton, and I am proud to be your instructor this evening. And this is week 5, and we have Kimberly with us from Dr. Shepard's class, and we have Caitlin with us from Dr. Shepard's class, and so we are glad that you are both here with us this evening. And I know Dr. Shepard is missing you all tonight, and hopefully more people will join us later this evening. So I am going to pull up, hopefully, my screen. And we're going to look at Blackboard week 5 and see what we have going on there for week 5, because we are currently in week 5, believe it or not, already. So we're going to scroll down. We're going to go to week 5. And this is what we're going to see for week 5. We're going to see that tonight we're going to be talking about the leader as a coach, supporting the attributes of transformational and situational leadership, and leadership styles, and we're going to talk a little about that. Your readings for tonight were Ubin chapters 1, 2, and 3. Here are 2 links for you to look at, talking about coaching and leadership development activities that might help you as you are continuing on with your PLC and leading your PLC, and with helping you move your school forward with your action plan that you're going to be creating. And then here is a link and an article about transformational leadership as well. So your assignments for this coming Sunday night will be that your task 3 revisions are due, and you'll also submit those to the Absol Dropbox for task 3. And then those of you who haven't already will do 2 peer reviews for task 3. And remember, your peer reviews go in 2 places. So if I were to review Kareem's work, I would take that template and I would upload it in Kareem's discussion board so that he would see the feedback that I gave him. But then I would also upload it in the Absol Task 3 peer review Dropbox so that my instructor could give me feedback for that as well, or a score for giving a peer review. This week, you and your Zoom teams, and you need a Zoom master if you don't have one, you all are going to get together and you're going to do task 1 and 2 that you've already done of the Absol, and you're going to have a Zoom conference, and you're going to provide each other with feedback. Then whoever the Zoom master is going to record that, and then you're going to send that recording out to your team, your Zoom team, and then each of you in the Zoom team will upload that for a grade. So it will take all 3 of you to upload that. And in your MELS handbook, where it talks about giving peer review and peer reviewed feedback, there's an example that you can go in and look at of a Zoom team peer review. This one is 33 minutes long. Okay, so we're not going to watch that all night. However, I did want you to know that that link is in there. You can pull that up and watch that. And I just wanted you to sort of see what that would look like for you going forward, because sometimes having that mental model really sort of helps clarify things that may be confusing. And then your task 4 draft will be due in Blackboard's discussion box by this Sunday evening as well. So even though only one of you will record your Zoom for task 1 and 2 team conference, whoever records it will send it to the other members of Zoom, and then you are each individually responsible for uploading that into Zoom for your grade. So if you upload it and about 30 seconds later you get a grade from me, That's not because I didn't look at it. I probably already looked at one of your team members and graded it as the team and moved on from there. So please remember to look carefully when you're submitting your documents, because sometimes you're accidentally putting it in the APTEL, which is such an easy thing to do. So just make sure that you're getting everything in the right place. Go to your grade center and make sure that everything you're supposed to have a grade for, that you do, that you haven't forgotten to submit something. So that is an important piece as well. So I'm not going to really go back over task 3 a lot, but I do want to just go over just a few little things about task 3. Let me scroll back up and get out of task 4, which I was looking at right before class. And so then we're going to go back to task 3. We've spent a lot of time on task 3 this week, and y'all are getting there and doing a great job with that. Remember that in prompt 1, even though it doesn't say lit review right there, it does say up in the instructions that you're going to do a review of the literature, and that is a part of prompt 1. So you're going to do a review of the literature on best practices on what you identified as your biggest problem. And then after that, you're going to do your annotated bibliography, and this is all still under task 1. And in your annotated bibliography, you will have 8 citations, 5 of them regular, and 3 of them need to be technology and research-based citations. And so let's say it's Study Island. You can't just put Study Island. You need to put, like, where did you find that information that you summarized about Study Island? Like, was it a link from a website somewhere? Then go in and cite that appropriately through APA. So the citations and your lit review is, maybe my problem is vocabulary, so I'm going to look at effective vocabulary for my lit review. And then in my annotated bibliography, it's going to be about things that maybe you can do to help with vocabulary. Maybe there are certain programs like vocabulary or vocabulary workshop or reading A to Z vocabulary. Those could be some of your online technology things that you put in there. And then it also may be about the structure of vocabulary instruction that you could do annotated bibliography on. So there's lots of things. And so then what happens is there are 2 prompts in task 3. So that's task 1, your lit review and your annotated bibliography. And then in prompt 2, you detail how your PLC created and used multiple graphic organizers and visuals, and you embed that into the narrative to demonstrate how the PLC projects that the best chosen strategy, hopefully a technology strategy, is applicable. So what you will be doing is you will go through there and through your charts and tables that you would be showing your PLC, and you all would talk about the pros and cons of the strategies or the resources that you found in prompt 1 to determine which one you think would best fit your problem, your most pressing need. So you'll talk about why your team thought this was a good idea, why your team thought this was a bad idea. Maybe your team thought vocabulary would be a great idea, but then they said, oh, that's too expensive, so we can't even consider that. Maybe they decided upon reading A to Z vocabulary because you had a free subscription to that or something. So you would talk about the pros and cons of both, and then you would, maybe they had the best measurement, maybe they had the pre-assessment, post-assessment, and it's a better way to be able to track student progress and growth. Just whatever the example is, you will decide then, these things we chose not to use because of X, Y, and Z. This is the one that we thought would best fit our need and our situation and our resources or what have you. And so this is the one that we chose, and so this is why we chose it. So those are just a few reminders about task 3, and I hope that helps a little. And so now we're going to go ahead and look at task 4. And before we even start looking at task 4, just let me say, it looks like a lot. But really and truly, you've already done most of the work for task 4. So don't let it feel like too much, because really you've already done it, and you're going to really start seeing where the work you did in task 1, 2, and 3 is going to be applicable to task 4. So in the description for task 4, it says the candidate will lead the PLC in the research and development of an action plan proposal to present to the administrative team. So that's a lot in one sentence. So you're going to lead the PLC, that's one thing. You're going to develop an action plan, that's two things. And then you're going to present this to your administrative team. So that's 3 things to do. So in prompt 1, and task 4 also has 2 prompts. So in prompt 1, look at all that yellow. Now remember that in yellow, that means you're going to write a narrative. In yellow means write a narrative. So prompt 1 says the candidate will lead the PLC. We already talked about that. In the research and development of an action plan, that's the second thing. You're going to create that action plan to strategically address your most pressing need, so whatever your most pressing need is. And it is not limited to the following. So there are 7 things listed right here. So you need to include all 7 of these things. If you want to add more than these 7, feel free. But you need the minimum of these 7 things. So the first thing that you're going to have in your action plan is the importance of an action plan. And this is going to be research based. And remember, it's yellow, so you're going to write something. And this is like a little mini research right here on action plans. And anytime you have a little mini research, lit review kind of situation, you're going to need references cited in there and then referenced in your reference section. Now in the app cell, let's see, I don't think I have that pulled up. In the at cell, get over here where I can scroll this down. The template and materials, there are some things in here that are going to help you with that first section under prompt 1 of task 4. And those are these Daggett resources right here. There are 2 right here. And then there is also an example of a school-wide action plan. This one happens to be literacy. Yours may not be literacy. But here's an example for you. It's an article. You can look at that. That sort of gives you a framework. And then these resources from Daggett about from research to action plans, what successful schools do. So those are there for you to get you started in that process of what is an action plan, why is an action plan important, what are the components of an action plan. And then here is an example. So those are 3 things right there for you underneath APSL template and materials that are there to help you with that first part. So that whole part helps you with that very first part of that. And those resources are there for you to get you going for this first piece. And then the second piece of prompt 1 under task 4 is the alignment with the student learning outcomes. So you're going to talk about right here, what is an action plan? What does that look like when it's research-based? And then you and your team are going to decide on how your action plan aligns with student learning outcomes. So you know what your most pressing need is. You've already done that. And the end result is what you want. So what are those learning outcomes? That's the end result. So this is where our children are now, point A. And what are we going to do in this plan to get us to point B? When you're developing this research based on your action plan, how are you going to align this plan with the student learning outcomes? So apples to apples. So this is what we have. This is what we're going to do. That's going to get us to these student outcomes that we want. And then the third thing that you're going to do is you're going to think about those short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and objectives. These have to be realistic, things that you can really, really do. You can't say that we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and by the end of grade or end of course, we're going to have 20% better proficiency than we've been having. That's an unattainable goal. That can't happen. So start in chunks. Remember, this called the ESSA, I guess it's now. They have those annual measurable goals now, and they increase in little increments every year. So don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Just do multiple years of sustainability of short incremental increases that will get you where you want to be, instead of making a huge goal that you just can't reach, and then everybody gets frustrated and then nobody can stick with it. So make sure that they're realistic. Make sure it's something you can do. And you and your team are going to work together to decide on what those goals are. So think about short term. What are we going to do now? Midterm. What can we have done in a month or so? And then long term, what can we have done by the end of the year? So I heard Dr. Stedman one time give the analogy that when you're diagnosed with a sickness, you might get an antibiotic at first. That's right now. What are we going to do? But that may not heal the problem. So right now, Kareem has all his cast on his arms and legs. That's the short term. That's what we're going to do right now. And then midterm, they might do something for him, maybe some surgery or something like that to help him get along a little bit better. And then long term, he might have to go to therapy, so that next year at this time, this will be a long, far away memory and he will be restored back to his perfect health. And hopefully it's shorter than a year, Kareem. But that's sort of like an example of that short term, midterm, and long term. You heard him say, they put this cast on me and sent me home. Okay, great, short term. It got him stabilized for today. Then the next one is specific activities aligned with the designated goals and objectives. You have determined your goals and objectives. Now you want to delineate the activities that are aligned with that. Activities, literally verbs. What are you going to do? What are those specific activities you're going to do to get there? Maybe if you're starting a new vocabulary program, you're going to make sure there's a time in the schedule every day that the teachers are teaching this vocabulary program. Maybe you're going to get professional development for the teachers. Maybe you're going to provide guided observations so that they can go watch and get good ideas from each other. So you are going to be determining those specific activities, the things that are going to be done. And then the fifth of the 7 are indicators of success with measurement techniques. And that's important, measurement techniques. You've identified your goals and objectives and activities that are aligned with your problem. Now, how are you going to know if that's working? How can you determine that? What are your indicators of success and measurement techniques? You've got to be able to measure if what you are doing is working. Benchmark test is one way to measure. MTSS progress monitoring is a way to measure. And if in the short term, if you do something for a month or so and you see it's not working, and then stop. Don't keep on doing the wrong thing. Stop, go back to your PLC, revamp. But indicators of success of measurement. That's going to also, besides taking student measurement data, that's also going to take observation and fidelity checking measurements along the way to make sure that things really are happening that are supposed to be happening. Then the 6th thing is clarifications of roles and responsibilities. So you've identified the goals and objectives, you've got your activities, your indicators of success, your measurable techniques. So this one is who is going to do what. So you can't do it all yourself. So delegate. And that's hard for me sometimes because I feel like, well, I don't want to ask somebody to do something. I can work that in. I can do that myself. But really and truly, it helps them develop their leadership. It makes them feel more empowered. And they do like the responsibility and they're willing to do it. But then you can't do it all yourself because then you just burn your candle at both ends and you're probably really not good for anybody. So assign those roles, assign those duties, have them bring that back to you. So this one right here, this clarification of roles and responsibilities, that is assigned to people. That's going to be adults in your building that you're giving them something to do. This is what are the people going to be doing during this whole plan. And then number 7 is the formative and summative assessment criteria. So here is the tricky part about the formative and assessment summative criteria. Formative does, in this case, formative does not have to do with students. Summative does have to do with students. So formative in this situation has to do with the adults who are implementing and working this plan. The formative assessment is, how do I know the people who are doing this and are doing what they're supposed to do? Who's monitoring this? Is it being done with fidelity? How is it forming along the way? How's the plan forming out, doing along the way with the adults who are implementing this plan? How is this plan being monitored to make sure people in charge are doing what they're supposed to do? Formative deals with the adult grown people who are doing things. And then summative part of the assessment, so that's the formative assessment, the grown folks. The summative assessment is the end result and does deal with the students. When we look at everything we're doing, are we getting the end result we want to get? We should see all this in detailed narrative work, because all that's in yellow, right? And it's going to take a whole lot more than a few sentences. A few sentences and these are just not going to cut it. So you need in your PLC, and you need to put a lot of time and thought and effort into these, into your narrative, because this really is the meat of all the work that you've done so far coming together as we are getting ready to finish up your APSL process. So then this red part says, and this is still prompt 1, this red part says, choose to display your action plan summary in either this graphic organizer or a PERT chart. And last semester, I thought they said they were going to take the PERT chart out, but it's still in there. So I guess you still have that choice. So you would do 1 or 2 of these. You would do either this graphic organizer. So what's the activity? What's the timeline? Who's responsible? What do we need to do it? What's the formative, the adult assessment method? So are you going to do fidelity walkthroughs to make sure that they really are spending 30 minutes a day on the vocabulary program and the time that they're supposed to be doing it? What's the summative method? So that's the student method, like what are they supposed to do? What's the goal? What's your end result? And then how will you know if you were successful? And in one of those articles we looked at in the APSL template and materials, it has the very same kind of chart laid out that you can look at as an example in there. So you'll go through that chart, and if you prefer to do it in this PERT chart manner, you certainly can, but in my opinion, that looks very complicated, and like, you know, if you can just put it in here, just put it in there, and that just seems like don't reinvent a wheel or do anything that's, so you're not going to rearrange this chart, you're going to leave it like it is. If you prefer the PERT chart, fine, do it, but I think it's, personally, I would just stick with this. You can just fill it in, add rows, and move on. So that's prompt 1. So now we're going to move on to prompt 2, since prompt 1 was not enough. And in prompt 2, we're going to see the candidate will share the action plan with the administration. So in prompt 1, you're creating your action plan with your PLC. And then in prompt 2, you're going to share that action plan with your administrator. So you need to schedule a meeting between the PLC and your administrative team. You really sort of want your whole PLC with your administrative team to discuss the possible implementation of action plan that you put together in prompt 1. The discussion should include, but not limited to, building efficacy, which means how will you build efficacy? Oh, I went too far. How will you build efficacy? What is efficacy? So make sure you know what efficacy is. This can be teacher efficacy. This could be student efficacy. What will you do to make teachers and students feel better about what they're doing? Because when they feel confident and they feel like they know what they're doing, then they're probably going to do a better job at what they're doing. What is efficacy, and how can you build that in your school? And the second thing that you're going to present to your administrator are strategies for sustained growth. What will you do? What will you have to do so that it continues over time? How will you keep this growing, this successful action plan that you're creating? How are you going to make sure that over time, with new staff members, new people, new students, that this continues to work? And this, a part of this is sort of going to be a marketing plan for your administrator, because you're trying to sell this idea to your administrator. The third thing is issues concerning diversity. When you look at diversity, that could be student diversity. We've talked about special populations, your subgroups to be aware of when you're looking at student achievement. What are diversity issues you face in your school? It can also be staff diversity. Even though this is mainly talking about issues of diversity in your student population that you're trying to move from point A to B, it could also be staff. And then in the fourth one that you're going to talk about with your administrator when you plan a meeting with your administrator and your PLC to try to sell your administrator on your action plan that you created with your PLC on prompt 1, you have resources. What do you need to do to get this done? What? So resources. What do you need? Okay, well, if I'm going to do vocabulary, I might need vocabulary workshop books, and I might need a book for every student, and those might cost $5 a piece. How much money is that going to cost? You want to think about materials. You want to think about physical resources, like things like, again, a workbook or a study island program or a computer or an iPad or a laptop. You might want to think about human resources. So who are the humans who are going to implement this and do this for you? So what basically resources, just basically anything that it might take to get your action plan implemented. And then the last one is establishing a shared vision of learning. So this will be the culmination of what you're talking about with your administrator, sort of the summary of everything, bringing your whole action plan together and everything that you've done so far in task 1 through 4 together for your administrator. You are the leader, so you need to go and take a leadership role on how to establish this action plan, convince your administrators that you have done this thorough work and that this is a good plan to help move students forward in your building, and to do everything you can as the leader to get everybody on board and moving forth with this plan. So that is basically task 4, and I know it looks like a lot, but your APSL is starting to wrap up, and this brings all your APSL together. It culminates at everything, and you've already done a good chunk of this work in task 1, 2, and 3. And once you start constructing this process, you will certainly see this. Now you're developing this task 4, prompts 1 and 2, this coming week. So you will not be able to present it to your administrator, prompt 2, this week. You'll have to go ahead this week and make an appointment with your administrator and PLC for next week to be able to present it to them then. But go ahead and get your plan for prompt 2 for what you're going to present to your administrator about building efficacy, strategies for sustained growth, issues concerning diversity, resources, and your shared vision. Go ahead and get that sort of written out and get your speech going so that when you turn your task 4 in on Sunday night, that is already filled in, and then you are already prepared with what you want to say and how you want to present this to your administrator next week. But go ahead, you can even write in there, like, and maybe even as an appendix, an email about scheduling a time with them next week. But try to go ahead and get on the schedule next week for them. So that's task 4. And we're rolling. Okay, good. So I don't see anything, so I think we're good. Dr. Lamb mentioned that you should have your task stream account created when you got the email. Go in, create that task stream. You will have to go in and create your competency folio. I sent you an email and a link about that. I cannot see your competency folio as your instructor. I can only see the students that I'm the coach for. So I can't see yours. So if you have any questions or if I can help you, that's fine, or maybe your coach can help you. But once you're in task stream, remember to go in and do your School of Ed dispositions. If you're having any problems with task stream, you can reach out to Seth Opera, O-P-R-E-A, at Gardner Webb, and he will already help you as well. So we're going to shift gears. I'm going to stop the share. And we're going to shift gears a little, and we are going to talk a little about leadership and some of the topics that you've been reading about in your lit reviews and also in your textbook readings. And so we're going to talk a little about the role of the principal in 3 different ways: the evaluator versus the coach, transformational leadership, and situational leadership. So we're going to talk about those 3 things because these are all things that you are going to need when you are leading your PLC into school change in your building. Hi, Mary, I just saw you from Dr. Shepherd's class. Welcome, we're glad you're here. So we're going to talk first about evaluator versus coach. Well, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a huge teacher shortage in North Carolina. And we are like 3,000 to 4,000 teachers a year short in what we're producing and what we need. So this relates to hiring difficulties. 20 years ago, we only had difficulty hiring things like really specialized kinds of teaching areas. Family and consumer science, I'll never forget. That was like the hardest one to ever find. But now we're even having a hard time finding teachers in elementary schools. And I don't think I ever thought we'd ever get to that point, but here we are. So we still want to hire the very best we can find. We still don't want to settle. We want to do the very best we can. But that really brings that role of coaching for principals to even more important status for us, so that when we do hire people, that we're coaching them, we're making them the very best they can be, and then we're also trying to retain them. In the administrator evaluation instrument, you have to have 4B on your PDP as an administrator, and 4B is about the recruitment and retention of teachers. And so that is one thing when you become an administrator that you'll have to work on every year in your PDP. So we have to evaluate our teachers, and we know that, and we have to do that. But then in conflict with that, we also need to be coaches to them. Coaching is really sort of helping people get to where they need to be. First-year teachers are brought in, and they're expected to do the very same work as someone who's been teaching for 25 years. And they don't even get like an apprenticeship time. And they're expected by parents, by administrators, by everybody else to be just as good as the people who have been there for a long time. So that's a very difficult spot to be in. So it's especially important that we coach them, which is one reason why the state of North Carolina gives them a mentor. But still, as your principal, as their principal, you would want to coach them and help them along, because through that coaching process, hopefully you are building and establishing a rapport and relationship which makes them feel a little more comfortable about coming to you to ask for guidance, to ask for help. And that's very, very important. And then as you are evaluating, you can think about the things coaching. You can talk about that through the evaluation process, that you know, if this is an area, then this person has made so much growth in this area or whatever. There's a way to work that so that you can coach. Watch them, give them feedback outside the realm of that evaluation process. Be in their rooms every day. They want feedback. I heard Todd Whitaker say not too long ago that, I know I'm guilty of this, that when you have a new teacher, sometimes you won't go into their classroom like for the first few days or the first week or whatever, because you don't want to make them uncomfortable. But really and truly, Todd Whitaker said, that's their first day of teaching, and they've worked so hard, and they've really tried to get their room together, and they're doing all these great things that they think they're doing, and they would like for you to come in and acknowledge their hard work and then see something good that they're doing and give them that feedback. I don't know if any of you have ever had Mike Rutherford's Teaching Talents, Artist and Teacher Training, but he has 23 teaching talents, and he says the things that you're strong at, that you're more likely to be able to develop those and be better at than your weaknesses. He said if it's something you're not good at, that you will probably never really be really good at it. So overwhelm your weaknesses with your talents. And so, so using that as another tool that you can use for coaching people, pointing out their talents, coaching them through those talents, and just sort of be there, be supportive, let them know that you know it's hard, and give them the opportunity to go, and teaching is so isolating. Give them the opportunity to go, watch other classes, watch other teachers work in their craft. If you don't watch other people If I'm going to play basketball and I've never watched anybody else play basketball, I'm not going to have an idea. So give them those opportunities, especially early on, and give them lots of support, give them lots of feedback. Feedback can be given respectfully and kindly, and so do that for them to help develop them and to help coach them, even though you do have to evaluate them, which can just be very, very difficult sometimes. But in the end, we are trying to coach them to be the very best that they can be. And in the end, if the evaluation process does not work out for the person, and you know that you have provided ample amounts of support and coaching and assistance, then that also helps you be more confident in your own decision that you might have to make in the end as well. So I want to talk a little about transformational leadership as well. So to transform means to create and to change an appearance or a shape or character. So transforming means creating something better than what already exists. Well, there's never a perfect school or a lesson, there's never a perfect teacher, and there's certainly never a perfect principal. There's always room to grow and improve. I always say I have not reached my pinnacle, because once you reach the pinnacle, there's only one way to go, down, and I do not ever want to be on the downward slide. So as the leader of the school, think about how you can transform your school. How can you enhance? How can you reshape your school? How can you reshape the culture and the climate of your school? How can you change or transform the perception people have of your school? I would offer, and this is what I always say, do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, and don't ask others to do something you aren't willing to do yourself. And you'll be well on the way to being a transformational leader. Tarina Allen works at Developing Strategic Leaders, and she says transformational leaders serve to transform lives for the better. And really and truly, what else do we do in school administration than to try and transform lives, adult lives and children lives, to be better? Transformational leaders' varied decisions and judgments are planted with the premise that how others are impacted matters most. Whether others benefit matters most. How high others can be elevated matters most. And whether others can be empowered matters most. So Todd Whitaker, back to Todd Whitaker, he has a book called What Great Principals Do Differently. It used to be called 15 Things That Matter Most, and then he has a new edition called 18 Things That Matter Most. And he describes some of the tenets of what transformational leadership looks like in practice. And some of those are staying focused on what matters most. Well, we're there for student instruction, but trust me, every single person in the world is going to try to deflect you from that, because they're going to want to come in and have a program for your students, and they're going to want to do this and they're going to want to do that, and then somebody else is going to want to have recess instead of reading or whatever. It's hard every single day to stay focused on teaching and learning, because there's always someone trying to distract you, and you just have to say no, 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 this is reading block, no. Focusing on people and relationships, not on programs. You can have the best program in the world, and someone may not be able to execute that. And you can have the worst program in the world that great teachers can execute, and it can work out perfectly well. Know yourself. Treat everyone with respect every day, all the time. And I add to that, we'll talk about that in a minute, to their faces and to their backs. Consistently exhibit a calm, positive, and professional demeanor, because when the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold. And that's true. If the principal acts calm and like everything is fine, everything is fine. But if the principal is acting off the charts, then everything's not going to be fine. And people are not going to be spending their time teaching children and focusing on children and their learning. They're going to be spending time trying to figure out what's wrong with you. So years ago, I had an assistant principal, and we were outside in the car line that morning with people being dropped off. and she came out there to tell me something terrible. I do not remember. That day it was terrible, but just like everything in this job, by tomorrow you can't even remember what it was because there's something even worse the next day to take over and you don't remember it all. But she came out there to tell me something terrible, and Lord knows what our faces look like, but you know, she's telling me and I'm probably going, oh, whatever. So it wasn't long into the school day that I started getting phone calls from parents. What was going on? We saw you and Mrs. Suggs out there this morning and we could tell something was wrong. What in the world's wrong? What's going on? Oh dear. So from that day forward, it did not matter if she came out to tell me anything and we were out in front of the parents at the car line. She'd come out there and she'd say, and we would just stand out there and wave and smile while she said, oh yeah, the teacher put tape on the child's mouth. Sure did. Yeah, hey. We just smile, you know, wave, smile. There's all kinds of things get told while we're standing there waving and smiling, but we haven't gotten any more phone calls. So that's good. Live and learn. Base every decision based on your best teachers. Treat everyone like you would treat your best teacher. Still Todd Whitaker here. Having high expectations for your staff and higher expectations for yourself. Deal with negative staff members. You're not going to deal with them publicly, but you're going to deal with them privately. Take responsibility and do not place blame on others. So transformational leaders often have guiding principles as a framework for their staff to work for. So these are my guiding principles that we have at our school and we've had for the last few years. And they're in the bulletin every week. They're on every staff meeting agenda. And when I have a situation at the school, let's say someone isn't focusing, well, one of ours is focus on the children and make their learning your top priority. So if I see some people in the workroom and they're supposed to be working with children at that time, and they're in there mad about something that's going on, all I have to say is, are you focusing on the children and making their learning your top priority? And they know right then, and they get back to their room, and I don't have to say these things often anymore, but it sort of frames that, remember, this is what we're here for. And we only have 6.5 hours a day, so we have to maximize our time. So my guiding principles are, there are no neutral interactions, make them all great. Focus on the children and make their learning your top priority. When you're at work, you're at work. Take risk, learn and grow from your mistakes. Make every child feel valued and important. Raise the capital, provide optimal customer service. Be a forest person, not a tree person. It's not about you. It's not about your school. It's not about your classroom. Sometimes it's bigger than all of us, and we have to remember that. And then be respectful to their faces and backs. Just work hard, be kind, that is all. So oftentimes schools have big things in place, creating perception that a transformation doesn't need to occur. And that's when a transformational leader should really look at the nuances of the little things to continue moving the school on a positive trajectory. There's a book called Leverage Leadership by Bam, Brick, and Santoyo, and our superintendent had us read this a few years ago. And they provide an analogy about the wear and tear on your tires, on your car. They say that on a day-to-day basis, the slight damage to your tires is invisible to your untrained eye. But over time, even this slight warping adds up to the point that months down the line, the car may brake slower, it may perform more poorly than it did when the tires on your car were new. And school cultures are the very same way. The more developed and established your culture is, the easier it can be to overlook these problems. And that's a big attribute of being a transformational leader, is making sure that your culture or your learning isn't wearing away right beneath your nose and you're not even seeing it or paying attention to it. So the authors of Leverage Leadership, really good book. I call it a phone book. It's a big one. Also remind us that we are what we repeatedly do. So excellence is not an act. Excellence is a habit of small things repeated every single day. So know yourself, know your true north. Stick with what you know is the right thing for students, staff, and the school community. Verbalize and share your guiding principles and let others see how your guiding principles or your non-negotiables support the beliefs of your school-wide efforts. Let them see you walk the walk as the leader, because you are the single variable in the school for transformational change. And then the last leadership style we're going to talk about is situational leadership. And that's a style that has been developed and studied by Blanchard and Hershey over the years. And it refers to when the leader or the manager of an organization has to adjust their style to fit the development of the followers he's trying to influence. So with situational leadership, it's up to the leader to change his style, not the follower to adapt to the leader's style. So in situational leadership, the style may change continually to meet the needs of others in the organization. So it's just like if you have a classroom of children right now, they're all different and you're currently differentiating all their learning for them. That's sort of an analogy for that, is you're going to have this group of adults in your building and they all have different needs. And so you sometimes have to adapt based on their needs and what they need. And if you're not in the rooms on an everyday, continual basis, monitoring instruction, providing coaching and support, then you're not going to be able to measure the temperature of your building. You're not going to be able to measure how you need to, what you need to do to be able to meet the needs of the people and the situation in your organization. Everything comes back to growth. If you want people to grow professionally, then you're going to have to grow yourself. And sometimes that means that you're going to be the one that's going to have to do something different. And a lot of times that makes us uncomfortable if it's something that we aren't accustomed to. But oftentimes it's the times that we are most uncomfortable that we do our most of our growing. You're going to be doing a lot of teamwork. You cannot do this job on your own. You have to trust people. You have to build relationships, and they have to be able to trust you as well. It's truly a team effort. Surround yourself with people that you can trust. Surround yourself with people that you empower. You cannot micromanage everyone. You cannot do it all. So you have to empower people to help you. And you have to make sure that people know that it's okay to make mistakes and that you make mistakes and that everybody makes mistakes. So you need to build those relationships. You need to be kind, work hard and be kind. And think about the good people that you have in your building and how you can work to multiply their strengths throughout your building. So that's all I have for tonight. I don't see anything in the chat. Again, we are so happy that Dr. Shepard's class joined us this evening. So thank you for your time, for your hard work and efforts. I would like to remind you that we do not have a coaching session this Thursday night, so this gives you time to work on task 4 and both prompts of task 4. Kareem, we wish you a speedy recovery without a lot of problems like surgery or anything like that. And again, I want to thank you for your time this evening and thank you for choosing Gardner Webb. We are so glad to be a part of this pursuit with you. If you have anything else and want to hang at the end, you can, but I'm going to stop the recording at this time.